Hey folks, welcome back to Wild West Barbecue. Today we're going to be smoking a bourbon coffee brisket, and we're going to go hot and fast. I'm going to keep the temperature in the smoker, or at least try to keep it around 275 to 300 for the cook. We'll see if I can manage or not. I should be able to, but we'll see. I did a hot and fast pork butt a while back, and it came out as the absolute best pork butt I've ever done. So we're going to see if hot and fast brisket turns out just as good. I hope so. We're gonna find out. I'm also planning on probably doing burnt ends with this. So if you don't know, there are two parts to a brisket: the flat, which is where you get the slices from, and the point, which is where your burnt ends come from. So I'm gonna cook it all together, just the whole packer brisket. I'm gonna cook it all together until the flat is done. And usually the flat gets done a little before the point. The point usually takes a little longer. And so once the flat's done, I'm gonna pull it. I'm going to separate the point and the flat. I'll wrap the flat and hold it for a couple hours until it's ready for slicing. And I'll go ahead and cube up my point, put it into aluminum foil tray or pan, and throw a few other things in there with it, and throw it back in the smoker for a couple hours to get that point nice and tender for burn ends. So we're gonna give that a shot today too and see how it goes. So let's get inside, get our brisket rubbed up and ready to go, and get it in the smoker. Okay, as I said, we're doing a bourbon coffee brisket. The coffee, of course, comes from simple ground coffee. The bourbon is coming from a bourbon powder that I picked up from a place called Old Town Spice Shop. I'll put a link down in the description for this. I've heard good things about this powder before. I have never tried it. This is the smallest quantity they sell, which the quantity that's out is a quarter cup or 1 ounce, which works out to 2 tablespoons, which is exactly what my recipe calls for. So since I haven't tried this before, I went ahead and bought this to see if I liked it. I think this was $3 or $4, and the next smallest quantity they sold was something like $35 or $40. And so until I can figure out if I liked this stuff or not, I'm just gonna try it once. If I like it, I can buy more. If I don't, I'm not out a whole bunch of money for something I can use. So that said, let's go ahead and get this rub put together. We obviously got our bourbon powder. We got 2 tablespoons of that. We got a quarter cup ground coffee. We've got 2 tablespoons black pepper and 1 tablespoon smoked paprika. Now the recipe also does call for 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. If you see my videos before, you know I don't put salt into my homemade rubs. I always omit that because I like to salt the meat beforehand. There's a couple of reasons for that. First, by salting the rub beforehand, it allows some moisture to form on the surface of the meat, which acts as a binder, which means I don't need to use a binder such as Worcestershire sauce or mustard or anything like that. And secondly, it lets me control the salt content. I put on as much salt as we like, and then I can put as much rub on there as I like without worrying about affecting the saltiness of the meat. So I always tend to salt my meat beforehand when I'm making my own rubs. But if you want to go with the actual recipe, it does call for 2 tablespoons of kosher salt. So let's go ahead and get this rub put together and get it on the brisket. Okay, I got my bourbon powder opened, and I have to admit this does smell an awful lot like bourbon. And I'm a big fan of bourbon, so I'm looking forward to seeing how this particular rub will turn out on the meat. So we got the 2 tablespoons of our bourbon powder. I got a quarter cup of ground coffee. Then we've got 2 tablespoons of ground black pepper. And 1 tablespoon of paprika. I'm just using straight up paprika instead of smoked paprika because that is what I had on hand. Now, to avoid cross-contamination, I'm using a teaspoon. 3 teaspoons is equal to 1 tablespoon. So there we go. We want to give this a quick mix, everything mixed up in here, and then we can go ahead and get this onto our brisket. All right. That looks good to me. We're going to go ahead and get this on the brisket. And once the smoker's up to temp, get the brisket in the smoker. So I got the brisket here. It's already trimmed. I did a trim in a previous video. I didn't feel like doing it again today. You guys have already seen that. I've got the salt applied already. I did that before I made the rub. So we are good to go with getting this thing on here. I'm just going to season the top side. The bottom side here is still all a bunch of fat. It's not really, the rub's really not going to stick to that. So I'm just seasoning the top side. I'm just trying to get the meat sides covered here. That's all we want to do this time around. Okay, and with that, we are good to go until the smoker's up to temp and we can get this on the smoker. We're just waiting on the smoker now. I've already got the coals lit and assembled. We're just waiting for it to come to temp. So once it's up to temp, we'll get out there and get it on the smoker. Okay, our brisket flat down here is done. As I mentioned before, there's two parts of the brisket, your flat and your point up here. And there is a natural fat seam in here. And we're gonna cut right along this fat seam, right through here. Go ahead and separate our point from our flat. With that done, we're gonna go ahead and wrap our flat in foil. And we're gonna store it in a cooler until our burnt ends are done. Okay. Let's take this and wrap it up nice and tight in foil. I always double wrap mine. I'm gonna get this into a cooler, and then we are good to go with that. So the next step is to cut our point into cubes for burnt ends. Just gonna go ahead and get started with that. That is done. Our next step is to add a few ingredients to this just to help it out a little bit. So we're going to add some honey. Come on, there we go. And we're going to add a little bit of a rub. I don't have any of my rub left over. I'm using Meat Church Holy Cow rub for this because it's what I've got on hand. Sprinkle some of the rub in here. Last thing I want to add is some butter. We're going to cover this in foil, put it back in the smoker. So I'll bring you guys back when this is done. This should take another hour and a half, 2 hours. And then we should be done. I'll bring you guys on back at that point. All right, we're pretty much done. We got our burnt ends here. Let's see how these came out. These came out pretty good, actually. I'm looking forward to these. They're squishy, just like they should be. Just gonna go ahead and slice this right down the middle. What we got here. It's actually got a decent smoke ring to it. I'm looking forward to this. That's juicy, good. Let's see how it came out. Get a slice carved off here. See how it came out. Let's see. It's a thick slice, but it does well on the bend test, which is good. And, oh yeah, the tear test does well as also. Let's see. That really came out. I can't taste a lot of the bourbon on there. Definitely can taste some of the coffee. Overall, that came out really well. I think I'm gonna be real happy with the end result from this brisket. It came out really well. It's cooked well. Everything seems to be tasty, so I'm hoping it came out well. I'll hit you guys back up after dinner and let you know. Okay, so we finished dinner. This was kind of a weird cook. From a cooking standpoint, the brisket came out great. It wasn't overcooked or undercooked. It was tender. It passed the bend test great. It passed the pull test. From a cooking standpoint, it came out great. From a flavor profile standpoint, it was okay at best. I doubt I'll be using that bourbon powder again, personally. I didn't much care for it. My wife didn't much like it at all. I personally love bourbon. It's my go-to alcoholic beverage of choice, which is why I was willing to give this a try, but putting that in the brisket it just didn't work. Plain and simple, you know, so whereas the brisket was cooked almost perfectly, the flavor just wasn't there today with that rub. So, you know, lesson learned, don't use that again. But I did learn hot and fast is a good way to go for brisket. I finished it up in less than a day, which is great. Less than 12 hours. I think it was about 11-hour cook today for it, so that worked out well. I'm used to 18, 20 hours for a brisket, so getting it done in 11 was wonderful. I really enjoyed that. I did notice, however, with this that the 22.5-inch WSM is definitely a fuel hog on high heat cooks. I've done a previous high heat cook, as I said, with the pork butt. That was on the 18.5-inch. I didn't notice a real big jump in fuel consumption for that cook, but I definitely noticed it in 22. So if you've got a 22.5-inch Upper Smokey Mountain and you're looking at doing a high heat cook, expect to go through a lot more charcoal than you would if you're going at your typical low and slow temps. Beyond that, the cook was a fun one. I wish it came out tasting a little better, but you know, that happens when you try new flavor profiles. Don't know what you like and what you don't, so no big deal there. I'm happy with the results of the actual cook and the fact that it came out cooked about perfect. That's encouraging, but you know, flavor could have been a little better. But oh well, there's always next time. So if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit that bell for notifications. Until next time, guys.